welcome everybody who joined us. Thank you for joining us today. And we're here to talk about how to beat bloating with every bite. And we're doing this ahead of National Bloating Prevention Day, which is coming up on April 8th. 25% of the population complain about bloating, but most of us don't even know what bloating really is, what causes it, or what to do about it. So today we're going to demystify that with this engaging and educational culinary experience. We're excited to have bloating expert, Dr. Kenneth Brown. Dr. Kenneth Brown, if you want to wave at us. He's our favorite gut check doctor, here to tell us how we can beat the national bloating problem naturally. And then we have our other expert guests. Dr. Brown is one of the top gastroenterologists in Texas and the host of the Gut Check Project podcast. It's a go-to source in his field. Dr. Brown talks about food that affects digestion, leaky gut, IBD, and more, all while pursuing and disseminating the most cutting-edge research. He uses a mix of traditional medicine and natural therapeutics and works to bridge the gap between pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. He also founded Entrantil, which is an all-natural supplement formulated using 3 natural ingredients that help reduce bloating, restores healthy bowel movements while feeding the gut microbiome. It's an innovation in the industry, and Entrantil underwent multiple clinical tests, including a recent study by Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, and the study found significant improvements in bloating, gas, abdominal discomfort, and constipation. We also have Eric Reiger here. He is the co-host of the Gut Check Project, and we fondly call him our label whisperer because he has a really deep knowledge and understanding of reading food labels. And he's also a registered nurse and certified registered nurse anesthetist. And he founded and led the Matador Anesthesia. And we have cookbook author, Chef Jeremy Robertson. He created nutritional meals for the Dallas Cowboys, and he's here to share his culinary wisdom on how food can be used to heal disease, especially related to diabetes, hypertension, heart health, allergies, and works with vegan and not vegan. And Gabriella Grandel is our gut goddess. She's a functional nutritionist and functional medicine certified health coach, and she focuses on digestive disorders, autoimmune issues, and incorporates a whole system approach that integrates the principles of functional medicine and nutrition and eating and positive psychology. She teaches people how to liberate themselves from the constraints of their symptoms and, go towards a healthier life when they're challenged. So let's start this. We're all live in the home kitchen of Dr. Brown, and we are ready to start cooking. So over to you, Dr. Brown.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam, for that intro. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to actually log in and watch this. And I want to thank our guests here, Chef Jeremy and Gabrielle, and of course, my co-host, Eric Rieger. Really, today is all about having some fun and being very interactive to bring awareness about bloating, National Bloating Awareness Day, April 8th. Why do we care about bloating? What causes bloating? These are all questions that we want to bring up. So the first thing is, what causes bloating? When we're talking about bloating, we're not talking about fluid retention. We're talking about the gut. What happens in your gut? Basically, if you're the type of person that eats some food and then ends up, your belly distends, your clothes get tighter, you feel full, like you have a balloon in there, that's the kind of bloating that we're talking about. The reason for this is because more than likely there's bacteria growing where it shouldn't be. And then when you eat, the bacteria break this food down before you can absorb it. These bacteria produce gas, hydrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide. This is what's going on in your gut. Now, why should anyone even care about this? The issue is it's really, really important because people don't realize that when this is going on, when you have this bloating, it's actually a warning sign that something more is going on. In fact, that tells us that there's some gut inflammation going on. When I talk to my patients, I usually use the idiom, there's a canary in a coal mine, and bloating affects everybody. And I'm treating a lot of people that are much younger, and I've actually said that idiom before, and they're like, why are we still using coal? We should be going green. I'm like, that's not the point. That's not the point. And they're like, why are you taking birds down to a coal mine? I'm like, once again, we're missing the point here. The point is, if anyone can think of a better idiom that is a warning sign that something more is going on. This is what's happening. And what's happening is when you have bloating, that means that you have gut inflammation. And we know that gut inflammation is the root cause of other chronic diseases. We are becoming sicker as a society. There's more chronic disease. There's more autoimmune disease. When your gut is inflamed, your body is inflamed. And the issue is that bloating is so common that people think it's normal. That's why we want to bring some attention to this. But today, as we talk about this, fortunately, we have a not so secret solution to the root cause of bloating, and it is called Atrantil. We're going to get into this, the mechanisms about what's going on. Atrantil, you can find it online. You can find it at multiple retailers, natural grocers. I actually purchased these boxes at Sprouts Marketplace, right around the corner, one of my favorite supermarkets. So let's go ahead and get started here. Chef Jeremy, you've got a really cool story.
Yes.
Can you tell me why you decided to become so health conscious as a chef?
Absolutely. The reason why I became a health conscious chef because I saw my family deal with disease in my own family. So in order to prevent that, I took it up on myself to go to school, learn about health, start cooking better foods, and not only that, just dealing with my own health that I deal with kidney disease myself. So by learning that information, I can spread that throughout my family and my community and along with you guys in the world.
Now, in your book, you actually went into a little more detail about this. It isn't just kidney issues. At 25, you had kidney failure.
I did.
That is a lot to go through at 25.
Yes.
And so in an event like that, you ended up having a kidney transplant. And you described how your aunt was instrumental in helping you learn how to cook healthy because you're from the South and traditionally Southern cooking may not be the healthiest.
It's not, but it tastes good.
It definitely does.
Yeah. It's great. It tastes good, but it's not the healthiest. But we can learn how to cook the same type of food, but you can cook it better by using different oils. So that way you can still enjoy what you want to eat, but just in a different cooking method.
So Chef Jeremy has taken that knowledge, his events in life, and now he actually has treated many pro athletes. And we're going to come back to this about what you've actually prepared today. Yeah. Gabrielle, so Pam did a fantastic job of talking about all of your credentials. You're well educated, all this stuff. But I noticed that you have a special interest in autoimmune disease and cognitive decline. These are two massive problems. That's a pretty big task to take on. Why did you decide to go ahead and take on those sort of massive problems?
Yeah, they are situations that are actually brewing for many years before we actually start treating them. And they have everything to do with the health of your gut. And so when your gut is inflamed and your gut's on fire, your brain is on fire. And then that can lead to things like cognitive decline and mental health issues. And then from the autoimmune standpoint, our heart and soul of our immune system is in our gut. And so if it's not an ideal environment, that often leads to autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto's and things like that.
Absolutely. If you think about it, when we talk about why bloating is so important, if you have gut inflammation, it's a triangle. There's a brain gut axis, a gut immune axis, and they communicate with each other. And if your gut's off, it throws off inflammation in the brain and in the immune system.
Right.
You know, one quote that I heard you say, which I thought was super cool, which is the further away we get from nature, or the closer, either way you want to talk about it, the further away we get from nature, the closer we get to illness. Mm-hmm. Tell me your philosophy on that.
Yeah, I think that that's important to recognize because our bodies, they thrive on whole, live, real food. And in our nation, our society, we're eating a lot of processed foods and a lot of chemicals and things that our bodies don't know how to break those down. They don't know what to do with those. And so we get sicker and our body deteriorates. And so if we can pay attention to what's here for us with all the animals and the plants and the things on this earth, and really incorporate that and embrace that, we can thrive.
Yeah, I think that It's unfortunate that we are getting sicker. We're seeing more of these problems like autoimmune disease. Dementia is a complete epidemic.
Yeah.
And you could see this change happening right around the late 70s when we started to incorporate a lot of processed foods. And so I think you're completely right that the further we get away from natural whole foods, the closer we start moving towards disease.
Yep.
And that's pretty much chef's philosophy here. So
Yeah.
you prepared a meal for us here.
I
Why
did.
don't you get in your position? Let me bring this over.
Right.
So chef is going to explain a little bit about what he's prepared.
All right, today we have prepared for you grilled cauliflower right here. We did some asparagus as well, and we also did a colorful salad. And we also made a peach balsamic vinaigrette. This is what we made. This is what we prepared for you today.
Chef, you said that you basically prepared all of this, and you pointed out that we do have the cauliflower. You and I and Gabrielle were talking just before we started, but some people will look at things like cauliflower or other cruciferous vegetables like broccoli or even Brussels sprouts, and they'll say, that actually makes me bloated too.
Yeah.
What do you do to kind of alleviate that?
Also, if you want it, we prepare this dish in two different ways. We also, if you don't want to eat the steak that we prepared for here for the cauliflower, you also can eat meat as well. Just little portions of meat, but more vegetables as well.
With cauliflower, once you cook it, Gabrielle, do you sometimes see a reduction in things that cause bloating?
Yeah, absolutely. Because cauliflower is really rich in FODMAPs and a sugar called raffinose that's hard for our bacteria to break down. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that our gut bugs are actually getting the food before we're getting it. So it's all about what they do with it.
Cool.
FODMAPs are thrown around all the time. So in my field, if somebody comes to me and we check blood and we do scopes and we just say, it's great news, Jeremy, you just have IBS, but you're still miserable, you walk out. And one of the most common things that gastroenterologists will say is, well, just eat a FODMAP diet. What does that mean?
Yeah, so when you're eating a low FODMAP diet, you're trying to avoid certain kinds of carbohydrates, starches, sugars, fibers, because when you have an imbalance in the bacteria, they will ferment those carbohydrates, and then they make gas, hydrogen, methane, hydrogen sulfide, like you were talking about before. And that's often the root of IBS is actually small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So bacteria get up into your small intestine where they're not supposed to be, and then they feed on those foods.
I think one of the problems with just saying change your diet to a FODMAP diet is that it's a limited diet, and you miss out on some really good foods like avocados and things like that. And it's been shown that if you just do that, you can actually develop a micronutrient deficiency, but you don't treat the root cause. You're still just modifying your diet. So I think that one of the things about cauliflower, it is a FODMAP. But a lot of people think that, oh, well, I can't have cauliflower or I can't have broccoli because I get bloated with it. But that could be just tip of the iceberg of now that could be the beginning of something more. So the fact you can't do that, then maybe you should start paying more attention and start looking at that.
Yeah, I think a low FODMAP diet can be helpful as a therapeutic approach for a short term, but it's really about repairing the gut microbiome through fiber-rich foods and other methods that we can take to prove that, so that you can tolerate more foods and reintroduce those foods. Because the name of the game is not to have less, right? It's to have more choices. And like you said, we miss out on healthful foods when we go on a low FODMAP diet, but it can be helpful short term.
You probably see that in your practice where people on January 1, they're like, I'm going to turn over a new leaf and I'm going to start eating healthy. I've been eating McDonald's for 30 years and now all of a sudden I'm going to do this. And then they end up feeling a little bit more miserable. Why is that?
Yeah, I think it's because they try to go all in, and a lot of times they're just going with something easy like a salad, right? They're thinking that they're going to, get more vegetables in their diet, but they eat a lot more than what their body's used to, and they eat it in the raw form. And so we need to, when we're trying to introduce fiber, we need to go slowly and build up. And I think that if they were to maybe focus on smaller portions and cooked vegetables and things like that, they could get there.
Yeah, so that's a really common thing when people try to incorporate. The doctor says you need more fiber in your diet, and people eat a lot of fiber all at once. As it turns out, these are known as prebiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And Gabrielle will explain that in a little bit. But prebiotics are things that your bacteria use as food. If you have spent a whole life abusing this bacteria, meaning a lifestyle where you're not sleeping well, meaning maybe you're not exercising, meaning you're eating all this processed food that has emulsifiers and a label whisperer, what else is in processed food that can screw it up?
You can find things like really bad oils. You'll find things like canola oil, safflower, the hateful eight oils really is what they're called, but vegetable oil, different things like that hide in there. And of course, there's all kinds of different words for sugar. It doesn't always just say sugar. Sometimes it's high fructose corn syrup, honestly, or turbinado. There's a bunch of different things that they use to hide little ingredients that will lead to more inflammation. So it's just much easier to eat cleanly. And I'd like to point out that you said that you like to find Atrantil even at Sprouts or at natural grocers. We even have HEB really in our area.
Wow.
You can find Atrantil there, but in addition to that, all of these whole foods are also easily available. It's a great compliment.
Yeah, totally. So what ends up happening, you eat this highly processed food and you have your microbiome. The microbiome are the 100 trillion organisms that live in you. Microbiome is actually there to help you. If you feed your microbiome well, it will treat you well. If you treat it bad, it will treat you bad. Mm-hmm. People don't realize that your microbiome, Gabrielle and I are 99% genetically identical, but the microbiome has its own genome and has 100-fold more genome than we do. But you and I can be 90% different in our microbiome on how we treat it. Mm-hmm. So if somebody has been treating it very bad and they've created a narrow microbiome, which we call dysbiosis, that's these people that try to eat a lot of fiber and do this. So what is a prebiotic?
So prebiotic is going to feed the good bacteria, going to feed the probiotics. So foods like onions, garlic, asparagus, jicama, those are some examples.
Yeah, so the prebiotics, some recent studies have just come out actually. Everybody always talks about fiber as being the main prebiotic. There was a recent study that actually came out and it was talking about how the bacteria themselves tend to produce more beneficial anti-inflammatory metabolites using polyphenols. So the study was comparing, looking at chestnut and quebracho, polyphenols in Atrantil compared to the gold standard inulin fiber. Mm-hmm. And it actually showed better improved microbial diversity and increased anti-inflammatory components like butyrate and things like that. So that's awesome. Let's get back to our high polyphenol plate here that Chef has prepared, because one of the things we can see is how colorful it is. So when you have a colorful plate, we know that we're eating a lot of polyphenols.
Correct.
Now, I am also kind of a high protein guy.
Okay.
And I'll eat that plate, but I'm going to want a little bit of meat with it.
A little bit of meat.
What happens when we add a little bit of steak to it, for instance? We can take this. This is a highly nutritious meal that he has prepared, but Chef is very capable of cooking in many different ways. Vegan, vegetarian.
Absolutely.
You handle food intolerances, food allergies.
Yes.
You've had professional athletes that have all different kinds of issues.
Yes.
And so if somebody comes up and says, listen, I want to do this, what I'm looking at right here is a meal with lots of fiber,
yes,
lots of polyphenols, and we got our protein there with the steaks, with the complex amino acids that help build muscles and repair and everything. Right. Why do you like to recommend polyphenols for your athletes?
Because it gives them so much energy and the body can digest it so much quicker than just regular processed foods. So that's why I would recommend it, just your vegetables, more vegetables, more vegetables, more vegetables.
So Chef Jeremy, I know that you coach many professional athletes and people of all walks of life on you being their chef and then how to shop. Now I know that Ken was calling me an idiom earlier, but what I would like to do is you had a saying for how to shop whenever yes, someone goes into a grocery store. What is that?
On the outside, around the perimeter. Around the perimeter.
Then you said something very important.
Oh, absolutely. You got to get out of there. Around the perimeter and get out.
Wait, what if I need toilet paper or something?
That's the only way you go down the middle of the aisle. That's it. Don't you go down there and get anything else. It's around the perimeter, cash out, and get out the store. That's all you need. to survive. So awesome.
So what you were harping on though is essentially most grocery stores are set up, if I'm reading it correctly, is that the healthiest food is going to be on the outside.
On the outside.
The most grocery stores make more money on margin on the processed cheap foods that actually are more expensive over time in the middle. So here you had your vegetables and fruits, and you also have the meat. You'll always find the more healthy versions of those non-GMO, organic, and fresh grass-fed beef on the outside of the grocery store, correct?
Correct.
So
that brings up a really good point, because Gabrielle, so when you work with your clients, and I hear this from my patients all the time, like, I want to eat healthy, but it's too expensive. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so really, statistics show that it's only $1.50 more a day to actually eat healthy. And when you think about what really adds up is the foods that are marketed as health foods. So like the 100-calorie packs and the protein cookies and the drinks and stuff like that. It's not really the vegetables and the meats and the fruits that add up. So yeah, we talk about how it can be really simple if you can learn some kind of basic cooking skills and learn your way around the kitchen. And, throwing a sweet potato in the oven and chopping up a couple of vegetables for a salad and getting a roasted chicken is really reasonable and quick, actually.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, because when people change their lifestyle and they say, I want to start eating healthy, they start buying into the marketing, and marketers are smart. They know what they're doing. So a lot of times this health food that they're putting out there has a lot of the stuff Eric's talking about. It's not natural. And you have a lot of things that are actually gut inflammatory products, like these seed oils, like these emulsifiers, and people think they're eating healthy. And we just heard the thing. So you're just going to walk around the perimeter of the grocery store. You're going to grab whole food.
Whole foods.
You're going to have the ability to take that home and cook it. Now, if you're like, well, I don't cook, in Jeremy's book, he describes how he incorporated cooking in a really unique way, because when people think they don't have time, and you pick up your kids and you swing by a fast food restaurant, but you with your young kids, you got them doing some cool stuff.
Yes, what I have my kids doing, I start them at a real young age. I take them to the grocery store and I teach them, about the foods. So I am the chef at home, so they have to be my sous chef. I can't do all this alone by myself, so I'm going to teach them, so when they get of age, they can teach their family too as well. So as I'm cooking, the protein, the steak, I have them chopping up my vegetables. They my little sous chef. So by the time all the meal come together for us to cook, I need their vegetables and I have my proteins, and we can all cook it together. So they my sous chefs.
So I think that's awesome, because you have family bonding time.
Yeah.
It becomes a family thing where you swing by. So instead of getting in line, we always have this saying that we always talk about. So every year when it's Colon Cancer Awareness Month, I have a bracelet that every time I do a colonoscopy on somebody, I give them a little reminder bracelet, and what it says is WWYMS. What would your microbiome say? And I do this because a lot of times people do a bowel prep, they do a colonoscopy, I remove a bunch of polyps, and the first thing they do is get in line at a fast food restaurant. And I'm like, no, look down. What would your microbiome say? Your microbiome says to do a couple things. And what he's talking about is totally awesome. You're going to go get whole food, walk around the grocery store. One, you're going through the effort to do this. You've basically engaged your brain, getting a little dopamine kick, figuring out what you're going to do. You're going to come home. You're going to be social. You got the oxytocin. That helps. All these things help your microbiome. And then you're going to eat these great polyphenols. And you have to get a certain amount of polyphenols that feed your microbiome and help your gut inflammation. So I think it's much easier than people think. I look at the line at a Chick-fil-A and it's like, man, you can get out of line and go to that Whole Foods right now and go grab some food and cook with your kids.
We know, and Gabrielle, he brought up that he's teaching his kids on how to do this, and you being a dietitian, functional dietitian at that, it's far more integrated, and I would say that more people have success if they start people at a young age, just like what Chef Jeremy said. But what do you encounter whenever somebody already has kids and they've decided they want to dedicate themselves to a change, and they're like, what do I do about these young people at home, and bringing them on board for us all to do this together?
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, that they're kind of letting the kids dictate the schedule when they're the parents, and they've got to put those standards in place like you're doing with your children,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just teaching them from a young age, they're going to do what you're doing.
They will.
Right? They're not just going to listen to what you're saying
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
And so I just try to help them figure out, talk through what's going on in their lives and their schedules, but then how can we just let them lead by example? And it's the parents are the ones buying the food. The parents are the ones, setting up their schedules for sports and other things like that. So they have a lot of control, even though they might think that they don't.
I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to teach your kids when they're young, and you'll set them up for success later.
Right.
Instead of now, we've seen an increase in metabolic disease. I mean, Ken, in your office, we see an increase in diabetes every year on year through the ages, whereas 20 years ago, the same age groups that didn't have diabetes before now do.
We are seeing, this is the first generation where the children are becoming sicker than their parents.
Yeah.
We're seeing cancer. We're seeing more colon cancer in millennials than their parents. Something's going on. Autoimmune disease, more. Actually, death has decreased for the first time. Like the death rate has not gone down. The death age has gone down for the first time. I don't know, it was like 30 years or something. Something is wrong. And one of the things that it has to be related to how we're eating.
Yes.
Your microbiome is exposed to all kinds of insults, pollution. You can get sick. You can take medications. You can have antibiotics, and what you eat. Now, the one thing that you have control over is what you put in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most important things, this recurring theme, is putting polyphenols in your mouth, because we know that helps with that. So you two are going to be my parents right now, because I still like to eat out, still like to have date night, still like to go to restaurants. Yeah. What are some tips when I go to a restaurant? Like what should I be worried about as a chef's perspective? Yeah. And as a functional dietitian, functional nutritionist, what should I be thinking about? When you go out to eat, what are some of the questions you ask?
I definitely want to know how my food is being prepared, and I definitely want to know where is my food coming from. By me being again from Louisiana, I would definitely love my seafood come from the Gulf. So it's there faster versus me reading the packages and say, and knowing that this came from far away, so I know that my food is going to be fresher and it'll be prepared better. Versus it coming from somewhere else. But definitely, how's my meal prepared? Where's the food's coming from?
Oftentimes doesn't a chef sometimes get a request on what type of, even oils, we've been on that subject, what kind of oils to cook in? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, what type of oils is my food being cooked in, whether it's canola oil or whether you're doing avocado oil. I want to know what I'm eating, what I'm putting in my body, because I'm health conscious. So one of my sayings, if you change the mind, the body will follow.
That's good.
So when you go out to eat, what do you ask?
Yeah, so one of the things that I find in my clients is that they don't want to be the one asking a bunch of questions when they're on a date or when they're, at an event. And so I recommend that they go online ahead of time and try to look at the menu. If they're planning an event, that they can look for kind of tag words like healthy food, vegetarian, organic, farm to table, and start to find some restaurants that meet those requirements and have some options for them. And then they go and pick out a couple menu items that that would serve them, right? And kind of general things I think about is eating things that are baked, grilled, steamed, skipping the fried foods, skipping the sauces and the dressings. That's where you find a lot of the inflammatory ingredients.
Go ahead and expand on that, because I think people forget that sauces. What do you mean by that? That's where the inflammatory ingredients are.
So like seed oils is usually the base, or a lot of people will have problems with dairy. So they'll add like milk or cream to those sauces, or a lot of people have issues with gluten. And so the flour that they use to bulk up the sauce, right, they don't really think that that's going to be in the sauce, but it is. If it says sauteed, often it's like tons of butter, and they might have an issue with that. right? Or if it's pan fried, people don't realize that they use flour to kind of make that, to sear that meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw it to the label whisperer really quick. Why are seed oils maybe not the best thing to get a whole lot of?
Well, seed oils in and of themselves, they get extracted, and it's almost always a two-step process. And so they will use solvents like hexane and heat to artificially pull these oils out of seeds, which aren't meant to necessarily extract these types of oils from. That process thereby makes it a strange fatty acid that your body doesn't really recognize, and it spins off something called a PUFA. And a PUFA basically, it's an acronym for something that's very inflammatory. It circulates throughout your body, and when your body is inflamed, it simply can't do repair, and it certainly won't regenerate good tissue, such as growth in muscle or be neuroprotective. So when people use the words like inflammation or inflammatory foods, oftentimes it's things that are literally prohibiting the same people who are consuming them from being more comfortable and really kind of feeling like themselves. So like I said, there's a hateful eight, and I wish I were better at naming them all off, but
do you know your hateful eight?
I'm trying to think. So safflower, sunflower, canola,
grapeseed,
yeah, rapeseed, that vegetable,
margarine. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah, so if you look at this,
We got close.
This is a spin-off from what, the 1960s or 50s, when the whole fat being bad thing started. And then that's when margarine came on board, and it just made everybody sicker. We know that that was a huge mistake. Fat bad, carbs good, and now we realize it's really, what we do know is fake bad, real good, stick with that. And as long as we kind of stick with that, what we do know is that these oils have been shown on a microscopic level to actually cause local inflammation in the intestinal lining. Now, I say this because when you start looking at large randomized human controlled trials, you're not finding any of this, because who funds it and who actually puts the money out there, and you need tons of years to do this. What we do know is there is a timeline where when all these foods were introduced, people became more obese. We saw in adolescence that anxiety and depression started increasing. There's this correlation between gut and brain. 100%.
And like type diabetes, used to be called adult onset diabetes. Now it's type 2 diabetes because it's not adults that are getting it, right?
Yeah. Have you seen that Alzheimer's being called type 3 diabetes?
Yes.
So that's the new thing, is type 3 diabetes, because it's so common that when there's insulin resistance, then that actually leads to brain inflammation.
Oh, I was going to, I like that. Anyway, I was going to also add, in kind of the vein that we're talking about those same oils, if you're trying to weed out the foods, the prepared foods, kind of like what you were describing earlier, of it may look like it's healthy, but it actually turns out not to be. If something has a really, really abnormal shelf life, they've been able to assemble that with emulsifiers, like Ken said, as well as seed oils to keep that shelf life. If they don't degrade, and just like both of our guests have said, it's not natural, they're doing that, number one, for profit, so that it lasts longer on the shelf, and that you buy it.
Yeah, so if when we're looking at these different types of foods that can actually have a shelf life for a long time, it does come down to big food. And I understand that everything is profit and we have to do this, but it's at the expense of our health. And we're saving money on this food, or the food industry is saving money on making the food, yet it trickles down to the pharma industry and in healthcare, where we continue to get sicker. You go to other countries and they do not use the stuff that we use. They have banned stuff. You go to Europe and they're not using this stuff. They're not treating the crops the same way. So, when we talk about this, very clearly it seems very bleak, but there is a little bit of hope. As you're cooking over there, that is a great way to do it. It's all natural. It's colorful. What we do know is that when you take in polyphenols, specifically large complex polyphenols, these large complex polyphenols do not get absorbed in the small bowel. They get rid of that bacteria that's there. And then when they go to your colon, they feed the microbiome. And one of the questions I get all the time is, well, how much do I need to have? And so I thought that we would do some sort of comparisons.
Let's do that. While I get the comparison ready, why don't you inform the audience on what someone could do for the trigger foods that they may encounter at a restaurant with Autumn Teal.
Yeah, so we talk about, you treat food sensitivities all the time. So people come in and they say, oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat this, I can't eat this. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so it's really just about talking with them and spending time and getting a really good history and understanding of what is going on symptom-wise, and then what they're doing in their life. And so it's, when we think about where food sensitivities come from, it's really how the immune system is recognizing that food. And the heart and soul of our immune system is in our gut lining. And so if that environment is not ideal, then they tend to have more food sensitivities because they have leaky gut, or maybe they have digestive function issues. And so the immune system is seeing that as a threat. And so it's talking through those things with them, and then doing things from a nutritional, lifestyle, supplemental standpoint to help rebuild the gut microbiome. And then oftentimes they can tolerate all those foods again.
Yeah, exactly. Because I get all these people that come in and they're like, I can't eat this, and this, because they think that they're sensitive to it. But the reality is they eat it, and a lot of times it's the bacteria breaking it down, creating this bloating.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, I'm intolerant of this. Now I'm intolerant of that. Now I'm intolerant of this. But if you treat the underlying cause, then their diet can expand and they can eat a nice, healthy diet like Chef prepared over there.
Right.
That's sort of the goal, that you should be able to eat what you want when you want without having all these issues.
Yeah.
You can't let your gut dictate your life. You know, people go on vacations and they build their vacation around where bathrooms are, or they make sure that they have routes where they can use a bathroom and things like that.
Let's do that comparison that you brought out.
Yeah, all right. So one of the things that we got here, Chef, I'll switch spots with you real quick.
Okay.
So you just stand right here. So one of the things is that the amount of polyphenols that you take in, the amount of polyphenols that you bring in, that you want to take daily, is at least, you want to get 1 full gram a day. That's minimum. Now, people that actually eat very healthy diets, they automatically take in a lot more because they're eating lots of polyphenols with each meal. So let's do a comparison here. So what we want to do is 2 doses of Atrantil a day is your daily dose of polyphenols.
Your daily dose of polyphenols, just like what Dr. Brown said, is 1,000 milligrams or 1 gram of these great large polyphenols. So what does that look like? Well, you could eat every day 4 bowls of berries. Now, I love berries. Do you like berries?
I love berries. I love it.
But every day, that would be a little bit difficult and a little prohibitive in terms of how much fructose you're taking in. So you're going to be conscious about the cost and the amount of berries that you're eating every day. I would love this, but this would be difficult for some. Beyond that, you may look at heads of lettuce. This is essentially a capsule apiece.
So 1 head of lettuce is 1 Atrantil capsule.
Yes.
Of the amount of polyphenols.
So we would normally take 4 capsules at 2 capsules and 2 doses a day. So if you can eat 4 full heads of lettuce every day, you will get all of your polyphenols. Simple, right?
Yeah, easy.
Not difficult.
Chef, do you want to take a couple bites of that, see if you can figure out how to
Oh, absolutely. Let's go.
polish off the head of lettuce?
I love Brussels sprouts, and I'm sure all of your kids do also.
Yes. Let's go.
But 3 bowls of this per day would be 1,000 milligrams of polyphenols, give or take, maybe 990 and maybe 1,100, but around in there. That's about what just 3 bowls, just 3 solid bowls. And our producer, Paul, loves Brussels sprouts. This is basically all that he eats. So something else you could look at.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I just noticed that you've brought a few other things on the set here, and I'm kind of curious where you're going with this.
So polyphenols are a natural occurring thing, and you can find them in trees. Number 2 pencils are made out of wood. And I would highly recommend that if you really want polyphenols, you only have to consume about 20 pounds of number 2 pencils. I recommend removing the lead. So that way you can have enough polyphenols from pencils. But wait, in today's day and age, there's lots of dilapidated buildings. There are lots of new construction in areas. Gentrification is occurring in old neighborhoods. Can you mind handing me that over there?
Shopping on a budget.
Shopping on a budget. And if you're really looking hard for your polyphenols and you can't get a hold of any Altron Teal, you'll see this is one brick, and approximately a brick like this is 1,317 bricks. Will have enough polyphenol content, mostly made up of just other plant debris getting stuck in the crevices. But I recommend that if you would like to get your polyphenols from a really hard substance, that bricks are a great place to get your polyphenol count, or you could just take 2 doses of Altron Teal. It's pretty
So
scientific.
let's sum this up again. 2 doses of Altron Teal, 4 bowls of berries, 3 small bowls of berries, 3 huge bowls of Brussels sprouts. How many pencils do I have to eat for 2 doses?
Just 127 packs.
127 packs of pencils
Without the lid.
without the lead. Hey, Gabrielle, does the eraser account for fiber? Will that help keep things moving? Or?
Nah.
And 4 heads of lettuce, or
Over 1,300 bricks.
13 bricks, you said, right?
1,300.
Yeah. So Eric is a math whiz, so you have to trust him on those numbers specifically.
Yeah, look it up. Polyphenols.
Polyphenols and bricks.
Yeah, you'll find it.
So yeah. So this is an example. We're just trying to bring awareness to. I'll switch back with you here, Chef. This is just an example of every time you go out to eat, start thinking, how am I going to get my daily dose of polyphenols? The 2 things that I do, I eat a lot of meat. I try to get in all close to a gram of protein for my lean body weight, which is a lot. So I try and get that, but I also have to get my polyphenols in. If I'm eating that much protein, sometimes I'm full, and I make sure that I get that by supplementing with Altron Teal, at least 2 doses. If I'm eating out and I'm going to be exposed to any gluten, I'm one of the people that actually has a gluten sensitivity. So it took me a little while to figure this out because I actually had to work with somebody who had celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disease towards gluten. But I realized that when I would go out to eat with her, I would not have any bathroom issues afterwards. But every time I didn't, I would have bathroom issues. And it dawned on me that I think it's the gluten doing it. Figured out that the polyphenols in Altron Teal, what they do is they form a little matrix around the protein called gliadin, and that makes it less reactive to my body. So when I go out to eat, I always have Altron Teal with me, and just because they seem to sneak gluten in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I take the Altron Teal right before I start to eat and right afterwards, and then I have no issues. So I get my polyphenols in, and I also decrease the reaction to gluten. I want to ask you a question, Chef, that I forgot to ask about the restaurants. Why don't more restaurants use avocado oil and extra virgin olive oil instead of using the canola oils and the rapeseed oils?
Because it's cost. So it all based down to cost in labor. You know, it costs labor to make everything fresh versus just buying it and just going on along with it. So it's about cost. So if you want it done right, it's going to cost you. So that's the big thing is about the cost.
So if you're a chef in a restaurant and I go, because we've actually called around and found out that like some of my favorite steakhouses, they actually have their meat in canola oil. So when they put it on the grill, they do this. And I'm like, man, don't do that. How do we get them? Like she was talking about, like at some point you want to speak up a little bit, but you don't want to be that guy where it's like, I'm gluten, dairy, like you get to the point where like, how much can they actually do and accommodate somebody in a restaurant?
Not much. You know when you want to go there and eat, or you can just ask them, hey, can I go back there and cook my own food? So that's highly unlikely, those safety issues and things like that. So again, go with your product here and take it with you if you want to avoid all the other things by digestive. So just take your medicine.
Yeah, and I think that's also something we typically don't talk about whenever we're discussing Altron Teal, but the fact that these different seed oils create local inflammatory processes. This inflammatory process are reactive oxygen species. Mm-hmm. We know that the polyphenols are potent antioxidants, so it can actually protect you from some of that stuff. So it's almost like this is an insurance policy if you go out to eat. Yep. You got to sit there and do that. And so
I made a comment on that.
You take your Pepto-Bismol.
I think it's about also, like you were saying earlier, like in other countries, a lot of the stuff that we have here is actually banned, right? Because people, they didn't want it, and they stood up against it. And so, not to take away from going out to eat, 'cause sometimes we want to do that, but the more that we realize that we're actually voting with our forks, and we can eat more, cooked food, we can take control of that and take our kitchens back, right, from the food industry, and limit our time out. Because like he said, you can't really control that because they have profit to make and all that kind of stuff. I think that's important just to think about that, that we have a lot more power in that, and then it's supply and demand. So if we as a country and a nation realize that we don't have to have things so quick and easy and fast, and we can really invest in our own nutrition by making our food, then we can avoid that stuff.
What was your quote earlier? Pay now, or?
Yeah, pay the doctor now, pay the farmer now, or pay the doctor later.
Pay the farmer now or pay the doctor later.
Yeah, because you're going to pay in medicines and doctor visits and just a poor quality of life. Like in America, we only spend about 9% on our food, whereas in like Europe, it's like 20%. So people just invest more, so that's the way to think about it. It's just, might seem convenient now, but it's not going to pay off for you in the long term. It's going to be anything but convenient later.
I'm going to get this completely wrong, but I saw a quote, I think it was by the Dalai Lama. I was in Portugal last summer, and it was at the hotel that was there. And the quote somehow, I think it's Dalai Lama, but basically is, the travesty of man is that he works to achieve things at the expense of sleep, health, relationships, so that one day he can have enough money to pay for his poor health, his bad relationships.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's backwards, because that's kind of the American dream, right? I'm going to work so hard so I can retire. And then you retire and you're physically not able to do all these things that you want to do.
Yeah.
So
you don't have your health. What do you really have? Right?
That's from Princess Bride, isn't it?
It might be.
I think so.
I think so.
We need to open it up for questions.
Well, yes. So we have about 10 minutes left, but let's just go ahead and conclude the sort of formal portion of this. That I hope everybody now realizes that bloating is not normal. It is a warning sign. Help me with a new idiom instead of the canary in the coal mine, but it is the warning sign. And we know that all health begins and ends in your gut. If you don't have a healthy gut, you will not have a healthy body, let alone a healthy brain or a healthy immune system. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways that you can at least try to improve is follow the teachings of somebody like Chef Jeremy, who talks about whole food and prepared this great meal, which, by the way, if you do the nutritional content on this, it's pretty amazing. It's got all the fiber you need. It's got a lot of polyphenols in there. And then we throw the steak in and you got plenty of protein. Like that is if I went to a restaurant, that would be a dope meal.
Yeah, it would.
Say it again.
If I went to a restaurant, that'd be a dope meal.
There it is.
And then if you are having any questionings or have food sensitivities or somebody, you find Gabrielle, the Gut Goddess. She is a functional medicine nutritionist. What that means is she is thinking outside the box. She is looking at other angles, and she's helping people treat their gut to treat their body.
Yes.
So, all right, Pam, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out to you if you got any questions for us.
We do have questions. Butter came up. What you were talking a lot about oils, good and bad oils. So what about butter, and how does that impact bloating? And then what are the better oil alternatives?
Can I take the butter one? Or actually, I'll let Eric take the butter one, because I think we probably all have opinions on this, but I think Eric and I are of the same opinion.
Butter, I believe, is actually quite natural. It's very good. I believe that what Gabrielle was probably referencing is maybe if somebody had an allergy or an issue with butter specifically,
right.
But it's a very natural fat. And in fact, there's a graph that Ken and I referenced many, many times on the Gut Check Project, and that is in the 50s when vegetable oil began to be used and substituted in as margarine, and butter began to go down. we see that as butter use went down and vegetable oil use went up to replace it, so did obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disease. Every element that can cascade with going the wrong direction has unfortunately coincided with our step away from use of real butter as one of the trusted fats. So some of the trusted fats are like butter, tallow, coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, extra virgin. Yes, and last is, or not last, but regardless, the more natural, the better. Oh, I'm sorry, unrefined peanut oil. That's the one I was blanking on there.
And so let me comment about butter and bloating really quick. So the question was, what about butter and its relation to bloating? The bloating most likely is being caused by bacteria growing where it shouldn't be. And those bacteria love carbohydrates. They love hard to digest carbohydrates, meaning they like carbohydrates that have artificial sweeteners in them that your body does not digest, but your bacteria can. They like these processed foods. And gluten is a little bit harder to digest also, so the bacteria love this. Surprisingly, when you have fat, it's actually doesn't cause a lot of bloating. If you think about it like this, if you have olive oil, you can leave it out, it will not go rancid. If you put some sugar in that, it will go rancid because the bacteria and fungus prefer sugars. And so the butter itself is a fairly non-bloat type food. What were you going to say?
Let me say something.
Yeah.
Coming from a chef perspective, what about clarified butter?
Oh, ghee.
Ghee.
Yeah, a
ghee's
lot of
great.
people can
What about
tolerate
ghee?
that much better if they
Yeah.
do have issues with the proteins or.
Okay, just
Love-
one.
yeah.
Love that.
Good point.
What's key?
Clarified butter.
Clarified butter.
Got it.
How about beans? That's the next question because they're traditionally associated with bloat.
Beans and lectins.
Beans? Well, who wants to take on the lectin aspect? I'll let you.
Okay, I nominate Ken to talk about lectins. Beans, they've got carbohydrate punch as well as protein. But I think more to Ken's point, certain elements of legumes, etc., they're healthy on the front end, lots of fiber, some protein as far as a plant goes, but they do have a carb punch. And if there happens to be bacteria where it doesn't belong, I think Ken will help diagnose you with an issue of bloating.
Yeah, so it's interesting because beans do cause gas. And the reason why they cause gas is that you actually have insoluble and soluble fiber. The insoluble fiber will go to your colon where your bacteria will break them down. That's natural. What happens is beans get snuck in a lot of places that people don't realize that that's fiber. So it's just like Gabrielle was saying, if you eat a ton of fiber and your body's not ready for it, you're gonna have a lot of gas. So when people go out for that chili dog and then they have gas, it's because their body's really not used to that amount of both carbohydrate. If you have bacterial overgrowth, the carbohydrates will create bloating, but then the fibers will actually create the gas. And so it is a gas producing food because of the insoluble fiber. And a lot of times when people eat beans, it could be in chili or something where they're eating a lot of it and they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
If you go to cultures that eat a lot of beans, it's not that gas producing because the body is used to it.
Right.
You look at the Middle East where hummus and lentils and things like that are done all the time. And other types of beans where they use fava beans and things, it's just not a big deal. It's not really known as a big gas producer. So it's more related to whether or not your body can handle it. Over time, your body will adjust, especially if you feed it what it wants, polyphenols and fiber.
Yes.
Excellent. I have one more question here. Can you avoid a FODMAP diet with certain supplements?
I think that avoiding a FODMAP diet. So what I think the real question is, can you not have to restrict your diet and get better? Yes. I actually don't recommend FODMAP diet in my practice. I treat the underlying problem. Try to treat the underlying problem. I don't try to restrict diets. FODMAP diet is what everyone goes on, and they feel a little bit better because those foods do have hard to digest carbohydrates. It's these hard to digest carbohydrates that the bacteria love. So all you have to do is get rid of that bacteria and you can tolerate those foods more. I always throw in avocados as a FODMAP because I love, why are avocados good for us? Let's bring that up.
Oh, because they're a rich source of monounsaturated fats and
Yes.
fiber. Yeah,
And they have polyphenols.
and they have polyphenols.
And yeah, so like I'm a huge fan of avocados. It fills you up and great fats. Great fats, and it's a way to keep you full, so that you can use that. It actually has a molecule in it that helps block the sugar absorption or the insulin response also. So they're fantastic, and that's in the FODMAP category. So when you have people avoiding these really healthy foods, I don't like that. So when we're talking about supplements to avoid FODMAP, what I would say is, yes, there are supplements like Atrantil that can treat the underlying cause, so you don't even have to worry about doing that, as long as you treat the underlying cause.
Also, you can use the avocado for a dressing too as well. You know, make your avocado dressing as well. So
Yeah,
It's going to be a
you
lot
can
better than
also-
some Hidden Valley
absolutely
ranch or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It don't take much either. Just a little salt and pepper, a little avocado, whip it around, and there you go.
How do you make it into a dressing?
Then you got to put it in a blender, add a good oil on it or whatever, and put your avocado in there, salt, pepper, and a little bit of good oil, good fat now, good oil, and blend it up, and there you go.
I also like to use it as a substitute
And
for
with
like
lemon.
mayonnaise, like in a chicken salad or a
Oh.
tuna salad or something. It holds things together. And yeah, and if people have issues with like dairy, like cheese or something fatty and then kind of creamy, like on a sandwich or a wrap or something like that, avocado really takes the place of that. And then their brain, feels happy and their taste buds feel happy about that.
This Zoom brought to you by Big Avocado. We're avocado fans here.
They're so easy.
Well, we just got a comment. Thank you for developing a product that I no longer have to eat so many pencils.
You're welcome.
Yes.
All right, guys, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our audience. Everybody on this panel is available for expert interviews if you're working on stories and you need any of their expertise. And we also have a recording of this that we're going to be sending out. And just thank you. We look forward to educating people about National Bloating Prevention Day, Monday, April 8th. And thank you. Let us know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.
Hey, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for joining, everyone.